Hello, friends and weary travellers. Welcome back to Spotlight Chewing. It is I, Holly Tinsley, the human wrecking ball of positivity, coming back into your life to talk about indie works, cool books, and all the awesome things that we love. Little bit of a change of schedule programming today, as my usual co-host Steve is not able to join us. I know he was chomping at the bit to get back in the saddle because we haven't done one of these for a while. However, we are going to be joined tonight by Steve's stunt double, the very capable Jared, who I believe will be arranging some explosions and car chases later on.
Hello, friends. Jared here. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So obviously this is the first time we've really met Jared. We've talked a little bit on the forums, but we haven't actually had a chance to have a chat about anything. So what's been going on in your life recently? Tell us what's been happening.
I read and I read and I read. I read a lot of books, and I do a lot of gaming, and I run my Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and work life balance. That's the thing right there.
Yeah. I mean, if you can work out how to achieve that, if you could let us know, that would be great, because I haven't worked that one out yet.
Well, you're a writer, so you're never stopping to working, right?
Yeah, this is the problem. This is the
That's yeah,
problem.
yeah. I got out of that business a long time ago, so I was like, nope, too much work for me.
Just enjoying the reading side of it. So,
That's right.
I
That's
mean,
right.
clearly that's the way to go. And that's probably something that our guest for this evening will agree with because he's a prolific reader. It is the book reviewer, friend of the podcast, and one quarter of the four beardsmen of the book Apocalypse, the quarter without the beard. It's the lovely Charlie Cavendish. Charlie, how are
Yes,
you?
I'm good, thanks. Hello, everyone. Yes, yeah, that's a fair description. But yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I've got my coffee, and it's fairly early morning down under for me. So I'm ahead of the rest of the world as usual. So in case Jad doesn't know, I'm in Sydney. So I'm usually anywhere from 12 to 18 hours ahead of who I'm chatting with. So the
Yeah.
as Holly knows, working out the time zones is always a bane of my existence. But usually we get it right. So.
Yeah, Charlie's actually talking to us from the future right now, so
Yeah,
he knows everything. He knows everything's going to happen.
within about a 12-hour window.
Yeah.
It's not a very good superpower. It's very limited.
Tell us a little bit then, Charlie, what have you been up to recently? Because I know that you recently did an interview with forum favourite Janny Wirtz, who is just one of the most brilliant people. And, I very much Janny Wirtz for president of the
Yeah,
world. So
I,
how was that?
it was amazing as you'd expect. I think our longest record to date as well. I think we topped out over 2.5 hours. I think, and probably could have gone on longer than that. Yeah, I was actually super because I thought, well, there's no way Danny will say yes. She's far too important and
Oh yeah.
better things to do with her time. But yeah, she was as wonderful as you would have hoped, and we had sort of chats before and after we recorded, which were great as well. So it was I think a dream come true for all of us. A lot of, I think we got a new mantra in life of what would Johnny do, and if you got a question about whether you should do something or not. So yeah, no, yeah, wonderful to hear about her writing and all the other many different things that she's done in her life. So yeah, that was a real highlight for us. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's so nice when you get someone that you just have that rapport with that, you can sit and do a podcast and you could just talk to them for hours. I know, Jared, you've done, podcasts and things. Have you had one that's gone on for, more hours than you expected?
Yeah, we've had a couple of quite a few, 2 hour plus shows going on that with different people. A lot of our friends here at Page Chewing and stuff, and that just go on. So, and I've talked to Janie too before in the past, and she's always a blast to talk to. She's like you said, so insightful and so knowledgeable about stuff, and so it's always a good time when you have this community that we got here with Page Chewing. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And I think that community that has been built upon the forums, it really kind of comes into the forum when there's people who have had a bit of a difficult time, or people have got oh, sorry, I've got a bit of echo on. Is my sound okay for you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I'll get Steve to edit that bit out. But yeah, just kind of to go back to what I was saying, the whole sense of community, that's really the reason why we do this show, is to try and spotlight people who maybe don't have, an opportunity to put focus on their work or to talk about the cool projects that they're doing, because there are lots of them that fly under the radar. So I want to kind of jump into a little bit about some local projects, some indie projects that we've got going on. First of which is a project called Realm Raiders. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but Charlie, you might have read one or two of the episodes.
Yeah, I read a couple of the early ones. I've got to catch up. I've been saving them as they come through. Yeah.
Yeah. So Realm Raiders is this really great collaborative indie project that is being spearheaded by the author Phil Parker. Phil basically got together a group of indie authors. I've got the full list here. Let me just check my notepad. So within this collaboration, you've got Simon Kewen, Rachel V. Green, Frank Dorian, Patrick Samphire, Alex S. Bradshaw, Phil Williams, Ed Crockett, Damien Larkin, and Derek Power. So a lot of really great indie authors there. And what they've been doing is they've been releasing an ongoing story called Realm Raiders, through Spotlight Indie, which is the platform that I started after last year's event. And it is a serialized web adventure story where each of the authors is writing an individual chapter, and then we're posting it up and people can jump on, they can read it, they can download it offline to read. And each week it's basically it's like a new chapter of like this serial that, could possibly go forever. We don't quite know yet. I think there's like 12 planned stages of it, but the sky's the limit really with something like this. So I wanted to put a bit of a spotlight on it, and I wanted to ask you guys as well, what are your thoughts on something like a serialized fiction? Is that something that you would want to see more of? Do you think it's something that indie authors should be getting involved with?
Well, I mean, look, it's back to how fiction was first done, really. I mean, look back at sort of Dickens and people like, that was serialized in the start, back in the distant past, and I think it's quite interesting to do that now. It's a sort of counter to the streaming, give it to me now culture of everything. Of there's people getting over those series that release an episode at a time, and I don't mind that necessarily, because I think it's sort of it adds a bit of anticipation, and it's it's just it's a new take, well, not a new take, but a refreshing take, shall we say, on doing those things. And I think, would it work? Wouldn't necessarily work for everything. I think, like anything, if you do it, everybody jumps on it, then it stops being as unique. But I think, particularly when you've got a collaborative approach like that, I think that's so it's almost like a sort of drip fed anthology in a sense. You don't get it all in one go. So I think it's good. I think hopefully you can see more of it, and there'll be certain stories that it would suit. I think, yeah.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. Is that they you said it was weekly? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Well, the way we work it at the moment is it comes in groups of 3 chapters, and then there's a week break, and there's a little bit of like supporting stuff like interviews with the authors that go around it as well, and then it'll be like the next 3. So they're all kind of blocked, and the authors themselves are working in groups of 3 as well, just to make sure that their sections are cohesive and that they all follow the thread. So yeah, I think it's.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how did that work? Getting that many people to sort of all work on something.
Yeah, I was going to ask that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite lucky because I've been privy to a lot of these conversations, kind of what I call the backstage conversations, where they've all put a lot of work into making sure that they communicate what each group is doing, and there are common elements and items and threads that run throughout the story. So everybody knows the destination that they're aiming for, but then it's really up to the individual authors, how they're going to get there. But there's a lot of conversation that is going on, and just for kind of background, I originally was going to be a part of this project, but I said to Phil, when I saw the kind of scale of it, I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to commit to this. What I can do is I can host it for you, and we can put it through the platform. So I've kind of had a little bit of all access, so to
Yeah.
speak. So getting to see the chapters in advance, which has been quite good fun. But in terms of for you both as readers, do you think something like this works well as, a taster of different authors, as a way to sample different styles?
Yeah, I think that sounds very interesting actually. The I've been trying to read more independent authors in the past couple years here, and having that kind of access to a instant website or something like that that would give me that fix, so to speak, sounds like something that I'd be very interested to check out. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
I'd agree. It's a good sample of that, and I think it's a little bit like I look at when I think Winds of Winter, for instance, which where I picked up the anthology, you involved it with there, Holly, and that some authors you knew, others you didn't, and then from that, I go, I've really enjoyed that story, or whatever. I'm gonna go and check out their work, or all that sort of, So I think but like a buffet, if you will, for indie authors.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a buffet for you to try out authors that you maybe wouldn't have come across
Yeah,
before, and see if you like their work. So that is Realm Raiders run through Spotlight Indie. So if that sounds interesting, go and have a look. And if you do like it, please share the stories as well, because engagement is so important with projects like
yeah,
this. I want to
massively.
talk a little bit now. Sorry, Charlie, go on. Did
No,
you
so
want to add
massively,
in?
it's like you've got to
Yeah,
shout to the void as much as you can for these things. So yeah,
yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking of shouting out things that are spectacular, I want to talk a little bit about some books that I've been reading. Um, Let me just find the right page. So, because I made a list and I do instantly forget the names of
yeah,
books
yeah. I'm
before
the
I
same.
speak about them.
I learned from last time. Don't think you remember it, because the minute it
Yeah.
starts recording, it leaves your brain, and then you feel terrible.
Well, slight sidetrack here, but I'm just going to tell you this little story because I think it's hilarious. So, earlier on today, I was doing a panel at a library not too far away
Oh
from
yeah,
me
that's right. Yeah,
with
yeah.
I put up a couple of pictures on Blue Sky and my socials. So I was talking with the very wonderful Anna Stevens, Alex S. Bradshaw, and Stuart Hodson. We were talking about science fiction and fantasy, world building, character development, and I managed to put my foot in it so badly. I mean, it really was on brand for me. Talking about instantly forgetting, author names, book names, character names, because I couldn't remember the name of the main character in The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. And I actually asked the audience as well. I was like, I can't remember what this character's called. And there was just this moment where the light bulb switched on. I just thought, oh my god. I was like, this is so on brand for me.
Yeah.
So it can't possibly get worse than that. So that's as bad
No,
as it gets. But
absolutely.
anyway,
Back to the
let's talk
list.
about some books.
Yeah.
Yeah, back to the list. Yeah. So one book I've been reading, I know Charlie, you've read this one. Jared, I don't know if you've picked it up yet or not, but Steve Pannett's The Sins of Steel and Shadow.
Yes,
You
I
read it
read it
one?
earlier this year. Yeah, yeah, loved it. Very
Yeah.
good.
What about you, Jared? Have you picked
No,
that one up?
I have not. No.
Okay. So I mean, Charlie's probably the best person to talk about this than I am because I'm currently about 60% of the way through it. So far, it is on track to probably be my book of the year so far,
Oh,
I
wow.
would
Yeah.
say. Charlie, do you want to jump on that one a little bit?
Yeah, look, definitely, I'd say, look, it's good. I think we mentioned a little bit in our messages, Polly, but it's a really nice, unique sort of take on sort of vampires and humans, and that there's not to give the plot away, but there's effectively a sort of second sort of subspecies, almost half vampire, that they're hated by the humans and hated by the vampires, so they're like the real underdogs. So they've got some of the powers of vampire, strength and long life, and that longer life and that sort of thing. But they're really seen as the sort of scum of society in a very grim city. It's great fun, they've got to go on some adventures I won't spoil, but how that comes about is quite fun, and it's a unlikely pairing, unlikely trio that gets put together, and what they have to do. But I really enjoy it. I agree. I think it'll be right up there for me as well. I think it's first of Steve's books I've read. But I think if that's a cover, that's a series definitely to watch. I think you'll it's a bit of a heist to it. It's sort of grimdark. It's vampires. It's very much. I think, and I think probably mentioned this last time. Like one of those books that sort of slightly mashes up genres a bit, so it's not sort of necessarily just one. It's not just a grimdark, or it's not just a straight fantasy. It's and I've really enjoyed those. So yeah, I think definitely one to get around if you can.
Yeah, I think sometimes you just come across an author
Nice.
and you just think this is going to be one of the rising stars of, the indie
Definitely, yeah,
scene.
yeah. I'd say
Yeah,
I can see good things ahead of Steve, hopefully for the future. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, do you want to pick out another book that has come out recently? I haven't actually had the chance to read it yet, but the first book is absolutely fantastic. That's Stephen McKinnon's In the Shadow of the Black Flag, which is the Legacy of Light and Shadow series, book two. So that has released this week. It is swords and sorcery, it's monsters, it's outlaw knights, it's a sinister guild of mages, it's got all the good stuff. I mean, it doesn't specifically say this, but I'm going to bet there is some explosions and maybe, not a car chase, but maybe like a wagon chase or something like
Yeah.
that. Don't quote me on it, that's a guess. But that came out on the 19th, so it should be available in paperback and ebook at the moment. So I think that one is also worth checking out. If you haven't read book one is Order of the Shadow Dragon. And Steve's just a great author and a great guy. So go and have a look at that.
Sounds like one I need on the list, definitely.
Definitely the ever-growing list that never gets any shorter, it
Yeah,
only gets
No,
longer.
no, it
that's
gets
true.
moved around.
Jared, what's been on your reading list over the last couple of weeks?
Last couple of weeks, I've just finished a book called Witchy Eye by D.J. Butler. Um, and it was the first book in this Witchy War trilogy that takes place. It's a fantasy that takes place during the early 1800s in America, but it's not the United States. It's there's all this alternate history that took place that had this all these weird empires and like the Empire of Ohio Valley and stuff like that. And it's a really cool setting. It has a very interesting. There's magic involved, which is, of course, why the history is not the same as ours, and you get all these hints that Ben Franklin was a magician of some sort, and other historical figures may have been, and it's a really cool. Kind of has that the chosen one kind of trope, but he plays with it in a unique way, and I really just love the history that he created in this thing, and the setting that he created with these characters. Takes place a lot in New Orleans, and he's got that city, that the aura of that city down. The magical aura of that city. It's really, really nice. I really enjoyed that book. And I'm also reading Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. Um,
Yeah.
and that is an absolute beautiful book. I love it. I love his writing. Um, uh, and I'm also reading Destiny's Conflict by Jenny Wirtz, and that's the 10th book in her series,
Oh,
which
well done. Yeah.
we're making
You,
through.
you'd be one of her favorite people 'cause she was made a
Yeah,
comment after that
yeah,
wanted more to read more. She wanted to talk about more of the books, but because it's such a long series, there's not only a few people that have got to the end of the series so far. So
yeah,
yeah, that's yeah,
yeah. She's over the moon about how far we've made it
yeah.
her series here, and we'll actually be talking to her in a couple weeks about
Oh,
the end
nice.
of this book,
Yeah,
and it's one of the best series ever written. As far as long fantasy series go. So all that's going on, and I have a bad habit of reading more than one book at a time, depending on where they are in my house and where they are at my work, and so
You
um,
just open cupboards and books just fall out on you.
yeah, so I am also reading. What else am I have a spreadsheet I got to keep track of this stuff
yeah.
with, and I'm also reading a Conan book, Conan and the Emerald Lotus, a new one by John Hawking. Um, and I like to keep up with my Conan every once in a while. I read all the comics, and I love those. Um, and I also just finished the Book of Skulls by Robert Silverberg for the Sci-Fi Masterwork series. And that was actually a wild trip. It was a lot of fun. So bunch of bunch of good stuff.
Just a few books,
Yeah.
not too many. Just 17 on the go at once, perfectly normal. Um, a question I do want to throw at you both, because Jared, you mentioned earlier about kind of starting to read more indie works. For the both of you, what is it that pulls you into indie, especially if you've kind of read a lot of trad? As your usual go-to picks, is it the authors that pull you in, or is it the book styles? What kind of grabs your attention?
For me, it's the authors,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
I when I started BookTube, that's when I saw interviews with people, and I saw interviews with people like P.L. Stewart, um, Philip Chase, and you get to know these people, and you get to know that whether you're gonna like, their writing of life just based upon their personality and stuff. So it urges you to check it out, and there was quite a few things. I read J.C. and Byrne because of that, and so on and so forth. So, and as the community grows, you meet more and more people, and you realize that that there's a lot of independent authors, that there's a lot to offer out there. There's a lot going on than if you weren't involved in this type of community and stuff like that you wouldn't know about.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it I don't intentionally, but I almost say that's 95% of what I'm reading is probably indie. That's where I found also, so I found the stories that I want to read. There's so much good stuff out there that, I mean, I'm not reading anywhere near the number of books that Jared's reading at the moment, but if only. Because that would help me get through the ever-growing list that we mentioned earlier. But yeah, I think
It
it's the
still
quality.
grows. It
Yeah,
still
yeah,
grows.
yeah. Well, I think that it's self evolving, self-replicating, isn't it? That particularly fun new author, they're great. Well, that's another couple of books that go on. Or if you pick up a series like Yanni, that's another 10 books that go on the list. So, and I'm reading Curse. I've just started my Yanni's journey. I'm reading Curse of the Mithrace at the moment, and about 75% through that, and
Oh, lovely.
yeah, really, really, really enjoying that. Um, but yeah, I've just looked back. I think in 2024, I reckon probably 2 of the 40 odd books I read were trad. The rest were
Oh,
all
wow.
indie, and it's not sort of any sort of particular sort of intention on my part. It's just following the interest of where I go, and then I think then you start to get to know some of the authors, and then they've got arcs coming out. So they say, "Would you like if I send that to you?" Or interview them. So you sort of tend to move into that space a little bit anyway. But if I go and look in a sort of I say more traditional bookshop now, and I'm going, yeah, nah. Like, there's a couple of more specialized ones that have a wide rep that are great. But if it's more just your standard one, I'm like, yeah, maybe there's the odd one, like I said, there might be a Joe Abercrombie in there or something like that. I think, yeah, oh yes, that's one I want to pick up, I want to read. But otherwise, yeah, almost exclusively Indian. I look at sort of the books I had this year, the ones that I've enjoyed the sort of most, or and it's all been, the last 2 or 3 have all been indie, really. I mean, you mentioned Steve there, like P.L. Stewart. We had, I think I won one. I think, well, technically, The Lost War, which was Justin Lee Anson, which it technically started as an indie, but then became trad. So I don't know. I think that maybe counts as both, but
Yeah, well, we can count it.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
I think it's. I'm not saying that, and maybe just because I found that author, and I suppose Justin enjoyed his work, but I found that to me it doesn't matter. I wouldn't not read a book because it was trad by any means. It's just a case of, with the time I've got, what I've seemed to devote myself to is that indie space, and there's so many good authors and so many different stories and people. One of the series I think I mentioned before, which I loved, was Douglas Lumsden's Alex Sutherland series, which is a sort of crime noir mixed with fantasy. So you've got sort of trolls in a world where trolls and your countries are controlled by immortal dragon, literally immortal dragons are in charge of the world, and they have their own CIA and all this sort of and there's trolls and elves and all sorts, and it's all normal. That's sort of so it's almost like a sort of 19 sort of 50s, 60s America, but they do have the internet and cell phones and that sort of thing. But there's that sort of gangster style things to it, and it's great. But it's just pulling. Now you would never get that in trade publishing. You're just pulling together all those different elements, and I think that for me is having that choice of stories. Or the thing is, it's just a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderfully dangerous rabbit hole, the world of
Yes.
indie authors, because what happens is because you have those access points where you talk to the authors and you get to know them, and then they'll start recommending books that they like, and because you develop this trust with someone, you think, well, they know what I like because they know what books I've read, and
Yeah.
then you'll think, okay, well, I'll check those people out, and then you get to know those indie authors, and then they start, and it's a slippery slope, folks. It is, and once you start down it, there's no getting off, and that's exactly where we want you. That is our nefarious agenda all along.
Down the rabbit hole. That's
Exactly,
where the fun is.
exactly. I want to talk a little bit about an author who is doing something really unusual, and I love stuff like this. So I love when people do really weird things and creative, out there, wacky reimaginings of how to tell stories. So Anna Tizard basically does this amazing thing called the Brainstorium Storycraft podcast. I don't know if either of you have come across this before, but
Oh yeah, no.
it's it's quite new to me, so I've only discovered this recently, and it is such a brilliantly inventive way of talking about writing. So what Anna does is Anna runs this game called the Book of the Exquisite Corpse game, which I think it's a game that has existed before in history in various guises, but it's essentially a word game, and people can go onto Anna's website, and there's a form that you can fill in these prompts. So it asks about places or things or characters, and Anna then uses all those prompts to create a story and talks through the crafting of stories and using prompts and different character building in the podcast. And I think this is such a cool and creative way to not only engage with an audience, and to get people involved with and enjoying the process of storytelling, but just to bring something different and quite dynamic to, the way a story is created. So my following question for both of you is, what are some of the stranger things that you've seen people doing in terms of creativity or storytelling that you thought, actually, that's a really interesting way to do it?
Cool.
Wow.
Throw the tough questions out.
Yeah.
It is a tough one. I like the sound of that. That sounds. I'll have to check that out. Definitely, that sounds really good. Yeah, Jared, you might have a better
I
answer than me. I'm still searching.
I need a minute to think. Let me think.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
wow.
I mean, maybe we'll ease into the question a little bit, just with for you guys, what are some of the formats that you like to read in? So are you audiobook fans? Is it purely just, do you like the graphic novels? What's your
Yeah.
go-to preferences?
Well, I short story was my thing. I was that's what I was mostly studied, and so I love the short story format, and I like to read short stories whenever I can get a chance. One of the things that really stuck out to me when I was reading Erickson's Malazan Book of the Fallen was how he used that short story mindset in all of the sections of his chapters, where each section you could get almost a short story out of that little section he did. And he mentions this in some of his interviews when because that was a style he was trained in, and that's what he applied to. Even though he planned out a huge series, he still applied that type style of writing to each section of the book that he was writing. And I found that fascinating because it's a format that I love, and I think it helped draw me into that world even more so than all the other stuff that draws people into that world. Um, and I really enjoyed that. I was a comic book guy when I was growing up. I collected a lot of comics, so I always enjoyed the comic book format, um, and I studied that a lot too. And so that's another side of things that works for me visually. Um, I don't know what strange things people do to prepare for their to write their stories with. Um, in my case, in the past, I always just sat down and started writing. You know, I didn't. I wasn't a planner, as they call it. Um, but I know everybody has their different styles. I know P.L. Stewart is a huge planner. He plans everything out
Yeah.
to the umpth degree. You know, and that's I find that amazing because I can't do that. But so I yeah, as far as strange stuff, um, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know what would be considered strange as far as getting something ready, but those are the things I gravitate to, anyways.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. In terms of, I mean, I consume a lot just on e-read now because that's being in Australia. Like as I said, it's quite hard to get physical books are quite expensive, or expect someone to send that to you. Um, but I think back to sort of sometimes when there's that sort of reimagining. I mean, I go back to when I was my age bit. I remember when I read that Dark Knight series, that Frank Miller with Batman. You know, when effectively, yeah. And now that I'm quite close to the age of Bruce Wayne in that particular series, it's perhaps it's more pertinent than ever. But in his 50s, shall we say, effectively comes out of retirement, and you know that reimagining of those characters that we know well, when done well. I mean, it may not be particularly new, but when it's done well, or that sort of, I think for me, it's that I mentioned earlier, it goes back to that sort of mixing those genres where you know you've got Mrs. J.C. Byrne, you know, that sort of superheroes in space, or that sort of you know, that mixture, or you know, with your books as well, where you mix those elements together, and it creates something new. And I think it's quite so, you know, in my mind, you know, if you can mix two of my favorite genres in one book, oh, brilliant, you know. That's doubly exciting. You know, I like reading either of them, but when I get to read both, then that's you know, that's even more exciting. So yeah, definitely. So I think, you know, what did I read last year? Things like sort of, you know, New York Minute, which Stephen Aaron wrote, which is, whilst not to be India, is a sort of, it's New York, but not our New York, and you know that sort of, yeah, I love that one, and yeah, I'll go and play. Yeah, when you go, try to think of what else have I enjoyed that did that very well? Oh, so many, you know. Or even that the Hellos, I think. Oh, you know, that was brilliant. That was, yeah. You pull different elements together on that. I mean, floating nuns. That's a pretty unique storytelling device. I haven't read that anywhere else before. So
it should be a bigger thing than it is. There should be more
it
floating nuns in
I
stories.
want that. That's the trope I want for 2026. Floating nuns.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. By 2028, we should all be on podcast talking about how sick we are of
Yeah.
floating nuns in
Oh,
fantasy
no,
stories.
another floating nun. I'm in a whole squadrons of them. Maybe, you know, they could sort of, you know.
That's the new dream. That's the
Yeah.
new author dream. I mean,
Yeah.
that's quite a mean question as well, you know, to ask, because the thing with
Oh,
people doing things that are out there and unusual is that until someone does them, you don't necessarily think, well, that's a thing that should
exactly. Yeah.
exist, you
Yeah.
know,
Hmm.
and then it comes along and you think, well, that's absolutely brilliant.
Mm.
Speaking of things that are absolutely brilliant, see the way I like to nicely segue into new
Oh,
sections.
Smooth.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about the fact that AJ Retker Season of Vengeance, the follow up to Season of Kings, is coming out in, I believe, a day. I'll have to double check. So I know it is definitely due out in the next week, and by the time this podcast is actually available for people to listen to, I will no longer get in trouble for saying that I've already read this book. I mean, I might get in trouble, but I'm a rebel and I play by my own rules. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this book, and I really loved it. So the the thing that really caught me about this book is that it feels like an evolution of an author journey. Now, I've read AJ's work before, and I love a lot of the stuff that he does. You know, full brutal honesty, it doesn't always all land for me. Some of it gets a little bit, too. I mean, not too dark, but I think there's definitely a type of darkness that I am less attracted to as a reader. Then I like misery. I'm not so bothered by guts and blood. Um,
Yeah.
but this book is one of those occasions where it feels like this is an author really stepping up to the next level, and that is really exciting to see. It's exciting for me to see as a writer. It's exciting for me to see as a reader. So I, first of all, will definitely recommend picking it up because it is such a good sequel. But it also raises the question of book series where the second book is your favorite or is by far in your opinion the stronger book, and it's not to say that book one isn't great, book one can be great, but second books that really raise the bar. What are some good examples that you guys have?
Right now, okay, this is
Yeah.
going to be testing my knowledge, isn't it? I'm
Uh,
going to go back and look.
well, I mentioned Erickson before. I thought Dead House Gates was a better book than Gardens of the Moon. I thought it was a step up for me personally. A lot of
Yeah,
people like the first book better, but um, that's when it really hit me that I was going to love this series. It was after that second book, um, and I also thought Philip Chase's second book was actually really great. I thought it was actually a for me, like once again, it was a step up from the first one where he veered off from the typical fantasy tropes and he actually started doing his own stuff. And I thought he really nailed it on that second book. So that's a couple of examples. I'm sure there's more though.
I mean, you always obviously want, the story to progress and for it to get better and better. But there are just those rare gems that you get where, you think the first book, oh, I really enjoyed that. I'm going to carry the series. And then the second one just hits you in the face and it's just something really special.
yeah. But do you think, to flip the question back to you for a second, in a way, as an author, do you think is that a case of people getting better at what they're doing as well?
Oh, 100%. It's
Mm.
in a strange way, the author journey is one that you as readers come on with us. So, you see that progression and that experience as we write more and we learn the craft and we get better. If I look at my first book, We Men of Ash and Shadow, which I'm still to this day incredibly proud of, and which is by
As it should
far,
be.
thank you very much, by far my most successful book. But in terms of technical accomplishment, it's not the best one I've written.
Yeah,
By a long shot, there are a lot of errors and mistakes that I made in terms of crafting and building the story. And now with the experience, I can look back and see them. It doesn't detract from the fact that I still love reading that story. It's still so much fun to sit and spend time with these characters. But absolutely, you do. You get to see how much you change and how much you evolve as a writer. And yeah, it's a very special thing to share that with readers. And
Mhm.
for readers to say, actually, I can see where you have improved your craft, and now I love what you're doing even more.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a two-sided question because it's you have the question of the second book an author's ever written or the second book in a series, which could be the
Yeah,
10th book somebody's written or something like that.
yeah.
So I think the question, does the author improve with the second book, is a good one. Uh, and whereas um, an author who's writing a new series, who's seasoned and has, a whole bunch of books under their belt, could nail it right in that first book. So it's that's an interesting question there.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I think it's strange because a lot of it depends on whether you write a series straight off and write that series straight through. So, for me, I wrote the first two books in the series and then I went away and I wrote a standalone. So technically that standalone is my first of something, but that standalone was better than, the second book in my series from a technical point of view. There'll be people that enjoy it more or less, or there'll be people that enjoy the series more or
Yeah.
less.
Yeah.
It's kind of subjective. But yeah, in terms of actually having the experience, yeah, it's a strange thing. It really is because you might end up with a series that starts with kind of one level of writing skill and technique, and then find by the time you get to book 10 or 11, that voice has changed so much. But because you as a reader have evolved and grown with that series, you've kind of just been there for that, for that
Yeah.
ride.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
I
If you
agree.
read more series, I think I've got to spread myself a bit wider, and I can come back and answer the question better, I think.
Yeah. I am throwing some really difficult ones at you
No, it's good. It's
today.
good.
Yeah.
Get the brain
Uh,
working.
that's it. I forget it's early in the morning for you, Charlie.
No, no,
You know,
that's all right.
prob
I'm warming up. I'm nearly there.
yeah, you're halfway through your coffee, so
Yeah,
everything's kicking in now.
that's it.
Let's
Wow.
let's talk a little bit then about in real life, in the great wide world, because we do all spend a lot of time online. And one of the things that I've noticed recently is there seems to be Charlie's looking very concerned now, wondering where this is
I've
going.
already read this specifically.
No, I'm purely talking about, I think probably for me over the last 6, 7 months, I've noticed that there's a real shift towards people wanting to get out again and get to things like conventions and events. Authors meeting up in real life, readers meeting up in real life, and kind of, like I mentioned earlier today, I went out to a library, there was an event there, it was a great turnout. I was quite shocked by the number of people that were there because for a while it really looked like events were tapering off and there wasn't that interest in them. So, what I want to know a little bit about is what is the event scene like where you are? Because obviously we've got Charlie's over in Australia. Jared, I apologise, I can't remember where in the world you are, but what do those kind of scenes and circuits look like for you?
Yeah. I'm in New England. Just so you know. The events circuit. I don't go to events. Haven't for a while. Um, but it definitely has lessened. I used to go to a lot of comic book conventions way back in the day. Um, Around the 2000s, I was working part time at a comic book store, and so it was. I went to a lot of those, but a lot of those independent bookstores have gone out of business since that time, the and the epidemic, the COVID thing, did not help with that at all. It really put a big damper on it. And so I have seen advertisements for some conventions here and there in the area. I don't know how well they're doing personally, but I hope they're doing okay. But yeah, even because Boston Comic Con used to be a big thing, um, but even that you don't hear as much about it. There was a PAX East, which is like a huge computer gaming convention, and that was in Boston last year, and apparently that did very well. So I think you're right in that people are starting to want to get out more, want to seek stuff. Even once the pandemic hit, my gaming group moved online, and um, we've even been flirting with getting some of the guys back together in person to roll those dice.
Yeah.
And so it's maybe it's coming back. Maybe people will start gathering more again, and we'll have a little bit less reliant on some of the online stuff. But again and again, without the online stuff, I wouldn't be here. And so it's
Yeah.
like we said earlier, it's a balance, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like it's probably not as big here because I guess we're just so far off from the rest of the rest of the world. But there's a big, like this weekend, there's a big one in Sydney called Supernova, which is a big sort of pop culture books. It's not only, so it's comics, gaming, cosplay, that sort of thing. I went last year, and I caught a few of the authors there, and I caught up with Tio Napa, who writes sort of probably preeminent cyberpunk author, I guess, in Australia at the moment. And so that was great to meet him and that sort of thing. But there's not too many of the, there's Supernova, and there's another one called Comic Con, I think that's later in the year. It's not quite the sort of Worldcon level or some of the fantasy cons that you get in the UK, for instance, and in the US, which I'm always very envious of when those seasons come around again. And I think, I was lucky, or was it 2 years ago when we came over to the UK and we stopped at San Francisco. So I caught up with Douglas Lumsden for breakfast in San Francisco, which is great. He rocks a mean fedora, which not many people can get away with, but if you see his pictures online, he does it, and he does it in real life, which was great. And then when I was in London, I caught up with, well, at the times pre Beardsman, Tom Bookbeard and a few other authors. We went up for a few too many beers in London, which was good fun. So hopefully I might be back at the end of this year, so it might be a chance to catch up with a few people then. But yes, I guess being so far away, the online thing is the best way for me to catch up with people. Like, it's the way to have that connection. So Holly, you've joined our Bidden RPG sessions. That's just a bit of excuse for us to get together and do it, really. And if we get to record it, is the excuse we use to. I think we probably do it anyway. It makes for good fun, and I get to meet. So for those that aren't the air quotes there, but a lot of people from all over the world that I wouldn't. I think there's a couple of comments this week of there's people and that I would never have met, never have spoken. I would never have spoken to Yanni Wirtz or Pearl Stewart or yourselves before. I might have read books. I think that, to me, when I first got in that indie scene and realized that you could contact the authors and have these conversations with them, was just like where have I been all my life? That was the only reason why I got into Twitter originally, was I've listened to a couple of podcasts, and then a couple of people reached out, so I thought, okay, I'll go see what this thing's about. So, I've been lucky in a way that for me it's been quite a positive thing, because it's allowed me to connect with a lot of people in very, yes, there's a lot of rubbish, and you've got to just try to tune that out, or not. When you find yourself getting angry about something, of why, right, okay, put that away. Let's not focus on that. But it does give you that opportunity to do that, and hopefully then meet up in the future when that's physically possible. But fingers crossed. There was some chat, and I don't know if it's still in the cards, of Worldcon potentially going to Brisbane one year. So I think they vote for one or two ahead. It's either I think they vote for the one after the next one, if that makes sense, each time. So there's some talk of maybe trying to get it to Australia, which would be amazing. So yeah, definitely I'd have to get to that if it comes here. So yeah.
I think there's a lot of good positive things that have come out of almost being forced to connect over the internet with kind of things that have happened in the world over the last few years. And you are completely right. I mean, it does open up connections with people that you would never have normally talked to. I wouldn't be doing this. Some would argue I probably still shouldn't be, but here we are.
Well, we don't.
But it is. No, that's it. We just do it anyway.
Yeah.
But it is nice, I think, to see, especially because similar to what Jared was saying, we've seen a lot of independents go under and those businesses being lost, and now to see that there is a real hunger for it, that people want to have those opportunities to meet up in somewhere that is local and small and independently run. And I've got my fingers crossed that we'll see more of it. The big conventions are great, we love them, but sometimes the smaller, more intimate, like little local events, they are the best things to go to. I am aware that time is getting on. We are reaching the witching hour now, where I am going to turn back into a pumpkin.
Well, this is my dog.
And also, Charlie's dog definitely wants to get involved and make some comments. But before we wrap all this up, let's just hone in on what this is all about, the projects and the authors and the books that we love. So, um, Jared, we'll probably start with you just because I think Charlie's slightly distracted by the dog at the moment. So, for you, who are your ones to watch at the moment? Who are the authors that you think haven't got enough attention or accolades that people need to know about?
Haven't got enough attention and accolades. Let's see. There are, well, okay. There's a lot of independent writers that I want to check out that haven't probably gotten the word out yet. I'm not tuned into like who's popular and who's talking about who and all that stuff. So I don't really know much about um, who is underrepresented. You know what I mean? Um, but I know a friend of mine, Chance Dillon, just put a book out. Independent author. I would like to see. I think it's making the rounds. I just a lot of these independent books I think need to be out in the world beyond the immediate booktube sphere. I would say that would be nice to see. But I also um, there's also a lot of books that were written in the past that um, people have kind of forgotten about too. That because I think I was surprised as hell when I entered BookTube and nobody was talking about Stephen Donaldson, and I couldn't like I was like, why is this? He's like the most famous author I was reading when I was younger, and nobody's talking about him on BookTube. I didn't understand that, because he has a lot of great works that are up there on the level of Erickson and Wirtz and stuff like that. So I was uh, I was surprised about that, and so I try to get the word out about those series, and yeah, just I don't know. Everybody's gonna read what they like, you know, but there's a lot to see out there to see what you like. You take a chance on something, and you never know that you're actually going to like something that you had no idea that was in your wheelhouse. That you actually expand your mind and go in a different direction than reading the same old stuff. Don't get caught in a bubble. Basically, is the word. That's why I like the read-alongs we do, um, because it introduces me to a lot of things that I wouldn't have normally picked up on my own. So I would say that get for people out there, get involved with other people to get along, to to get involved with read-alongs and get involved with that stuff so that you can expose yourself to more fantasy and more science fiction because there's a lot out there, and I think that would reward you because you'd be finding stuff, and it would help independent authors too because they would find stuff that is not in the mold of the traditional publishing you know that might not be available on your Barnes and Noble shelf or what have you.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to jump on there quickly because you made a really good point as well, which I think is really valid and important to remember, is that it's not always about the new and shiny. It is great when an author's got a new book out and we want to give them support. But also there are loads of authors out there, as you've rightly said, who have had books out for, you know, decades and years. The amount of times I've found an author and gone, oh, it's great, I found a brand new author, and then realised that they've been writing since 2010, and they've got 10 of the
Yeah,
books out. So sometimes it's okay to pick up something that is a little bit older and maybe hasn't, had that attention or has been forgotten. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Charlie, what's on your to watch list at the moment?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Just on that point quickly, I love if I find an author, I'd love the book, and then find they've got a whole load of other ones. Then that's like a double bonus. Not only have I got found a new author, new book, but there's another, yeah, treasure trove to dive into. Um, well, I probably have to give a shout out to my fellow beardsmen who not only am I the only one without a beard, but I'm also the only one that's not technically a writer. So I feel very much the sort of the excess baggage in that group. But David T. List's got a wonderful Violence and Vigilance, which has been out for a little while now. But that's great. That's a great book. Very very amusing. It's got some good, excellent characters. I think the character names, sorry, the chapter names that David shows are quite amusing. There's sharks that run on land, so there's actual land sharks that people ride and chase down. So there's gladiatorial battles, so that's always quite fun. Just recently read, it's just about to come out, and I should know the date, so apologies. But I read my Father Beersman D.B. Rook's Residuum, which is a sort of bit of a departure from his other work. It's very much a sort of sci-fi, Firefly-esque sort of elements to it. There's killer robots, space spiders. It's a very fun novella. So and a very kick-ass robot in there that's a sort of, yeah, one of my favorite characters I read recently. So I think definitely give him a shout out. And Tom Bookbeard's also working on a Sky Pirate book, which I have read an early version of, called The Corsair. I think he's working on that at the moment. So that's that will come out. That's very much a Treasure Island inspired story. So that's a lot of fun. But ships that fly in the sky, so always good fun. In terms of what I'm looking at coming out, I think I've read quite a bit recently of Baptiste Pinson Wu's. I read his Norse Inspired 3, Army of One. That's a great series that he's probably in the past been better known for his historical fiction set in Japan. Undead Samurai, one of my favorite books from last year. It is literally samurais with zombies, but that's an excellent story. I can't recommend that one highly enough. It's set in a historical setting, but that's a lot of fun. He's got a book coming out later this year, which I haven't started yet because it's quite a big one, called The Warlords of Owari, which is probably not how you pronounce it. His it's sort of set in the period sort of before Shogun. It's that sort of era of Japan, so that one's quite worth having a look at. I'm very excited to read James Lloyd Doolan's Only a Grave Will Do. It's the third book in his series, which I've loved. I'm getting my tissues ready because I think I'm going to be destroyed by it. But that's always a lot of fun. And probably the last one that is my most anticipated is Douglas Lumsden. I bet he's got a new series called Shade the Collector, who's a sort of a how to describe it? He's a werecat to start with, so that means he can dissipate into 12 separate cats at any one time should he choose to do so, or he can also send them out individually, which is quite fun. But he's also a collector, inverted commas, of exotic objects and those sorts of things. So he's got a new book coming out called In Deep Coprolite, which is quite an amusing title. That's a lot of fun. And it's set in the same world as the other series, so this is a world where dragons exist, trolls are enforcers, that sort of thing. So yeah, those ones I'd give a big shout out to. Looking forward to reading some of those coming up.
Cool. Yeah.
That's some good recommendations there, definitely. It is about that time, so I do want to start wrapping us up a little bit. It has been fantastic to sit and chat to the both of you. For anyone who has been listening to this and is thinking, well, I'm an indie author and I've got some amazing stuff, please tell us about it, because the whole point of us doing this is to be able to shine a light on it. Get in touch with me, get in touch with Steve, jump on the forums, chat to us. There are loads of ways that we are trying to highlight people's work at the moment. We want to be the antithesis of the doom scroll. That is well, that's my plan. I don't know what Steve's plan is. He's got his own agenda, But until next time, Jared, what if there's anything that you want to add in before we go, in terms of anything exciting that you're doing, read alongs on the forum that you want people to join in, now is the time to let us know about those.
Yeah, please join in on the forums. Please join in. We at the Sci-Fi Masterworks read along is fun. We're far into Janie Worth's read along, so you'd have to do a lot of reading to catch up to that one. But that's good stuff. And we also have a podcast, Speculative Speculations, that we read. We read a sci-fi sections of a sci-fi and science fiction book every week, and talk about it. And we always switch up the books, so you can join that anytime. Um, and and you can always check out my BookTube channel, Fantasy Thinker, and see what else I'm up to, because the list gets longer and longer as the more I think about it here. But yeah,
Yeah.
good
Well,
stuff.
we appreciate you jumping in and being Steve's stunt double for the evening. The way you jumped through the window to get into your chair to do the podcast was just amazing. I mean, no one else will see that video except us, but the backflip was brilliant. Loved all of
Yeah.
that.
Well, I'll be on painkillers for the next few days, but that's all right.
It's all worth it. Charlie, what have you got coming up with Beardsman and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, look, we've got some good sort of guest line. At next weekend, we're chatting to AJ Calvin, who's I don't know, I'm going blank, so we've got to check the list, Charlie, get your books right. Whose book Wraith and Revolution just came out. And she's also got her other series, but so looking forward to chatting to her, and I'll be reading that. So we've got tried, yeah, every one or two authors a month we're chatting to there. So yeah, if you'd like to hear some interesting authors chat, bit of whispering on, we invariably go down some rabbit holes. And we also do I think I'll have to see when the next one's due, but we also do a sort of live RPG session, which Holly, you very kindly been on. We'll have to get you on again to bring back Nuggets, I think, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, McRib and Nuggets. Yeah,
Nuggets, yeah.
the
So
duo.
we have, yeah. You have to tune in to see that. I won't give any spoilers away. Definitely go and check out that episode. So we do some live, which is a lot of fun as well. So that's probably take a fair amount of my time at the moment, which is good to sort of trying to work on that. Otherwise, yeah, just trying to read and live life and not fall off the cliff. So yeah.
I mean, if ever there were words to end a podcast on, Charlie's advice to you all is read more and don't fall off a cliff.
And
Yeah.
if you live in a
Solid.
country that has venomous creatures, avoid them.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd like to impart wisdom as we leave you, but that is it for now. So thank you so much for joining us. We will have more episodes of Spotlight Chewing coming up in the future. And in the meantime, please do go over to the forum, say hello and get involved. It is a wonderful, friendly place to be. That's it. See you later.
Yes, zero.
Okay.